Hello students, today we're going to solve radical equations where when you're solving them they come out to be quadratics. So you're going to end up with a couple of different answers. And so what you're going to have to do is quadratics often produce extraneous solutions, and so you're going to have to check every answer. Make sure you do that every time you end up with a quadratic when you're trying to solve it. Alright, so here's our first example. We have 2 times x minus 2 raised to the 2/3 power, and that equals 50. Well, the first thing that we're going to notice is that you want to isolate either the exponential or the radical. So this is what's raised to the exponent, so we need to isolate that by getting rid of this 2, and in order to get rid of the 2 we have to divide both sides by 2. Okay, so then we have x minus 2 to the 2/3 power, and 50 divided by 2 is 25. Okay, well, one thing we could do is we could go ahead and convert this to an to a radical, but I want you to notice that when you have something raised to a power, which is 2/3, in order to get this to just be the power of 1 and get rid of that power, is you want to raise it to the inverse power. So if you have a 2/3, the reciprocal of that would be 3/2. So we're going to raise both sides to the power of 3/2. And so basically what's going to happen there is 2/3 times 3/2 is 6/6, which is just 1. So these just cancel. And we end up with x minus 2 equals 25 to the 3/2 power. What you can do to do this in your head is you want to think, okay, that bottom number is my radical. So it's the square root of 25, which is 5, and then 5 cubed, which is 125. But what you're going to need to do is you're going to have to put a plus or minus 125. Because if you remember, we took the square root, and when you take the square root, it's plus or minus. So you have to include both of those answers there. So then now we're going to split this up, and we're going to say, okay, x minus 2 could equal positive 125, or x minus 2 could equal negative 125. You have to solve both of them. So we're going to add 2 to the other side here. So that means that x could equal 127, or if we add 2 over here, x is equal to a negative 123. Okay, now you've got both of these answers, and so you're going to have to plug it in to check both of them. So let's go ahead and do that over here. So if I plug in the 127, I'm going to have 2 times 127 minus 2 to the 2/3 power, and that equals 50. Well, 127 minus 2 is 125, so we're going to have 2 times 125 to the 2/3 power, and hopefully that equals 50. Well, 125 to the 2/3 power is 25, and then 2 times 25 is, in fact, 50. Okay, so now let's check the other one. So then we know that 127 works, so that's one of our answers. Now let's check the other one. So 2 times negative 123 minus 2 to the 2/3 power. Hopefully that equals 50. So we have 2 times negative 125 to the 2/3 power. And remember, the 2/3, that means 3 is the radical, so we're taking the cube root of negative 125. The cube root of a negative is negative, so that's a negative 5, and then negative 5 squared does give me positive 25, and so this one checks out as well, because 2 times 25 is in fact 50. You can check these on your calculator if you can't do this in your head. And that would be a good thing to do. Okay, so both of these answers check out. Alright, for our second example, we have the square root of 2x minus 3 plus 3 equals x. So from yesterday, you need to remember your first step is to isolate your radical. So we need to move this plus 3 to the other side and make it a minus 3. So that's going to cancel, and we have the square root of 2x minus 3, and that equals x minus 3. Well, to get rid of the square root, we would want to square both sides. But then notice that on the right side, we have a binomial. So the left side is going to be 2x minus 3. The right side, because it's a binomial, we're going to have to use FOIL or the box. And we're going to have to multiply those together. Okay? Well, I'm going to go ahead and use FOIL on this one. So I've got 2x minus 3 equals FOIL. First term would be x squared. The outside would be a negative 3x. The inside would be a negative 3x, so that would add together to give you negative 6x. And then negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9. Now, in order to solve a quadratic, remember we have to get everything on the same side. So we're going to subtract the 2x to bring it over here. We're also going to add 3 to get it over there. So on the left side we have 0, and it equals x squared minus 8x plus 12. Okay, at this point you can use any of the methods that we just discussed in the previous unit. You can solve by factoring, you could solve by completing the square, which I know was everybody's favorite, or you can use the quadratic formula. I'll always try and see if I can factor this first. So let's try and see if we can factor this. If we're going to factor it, remember we have to make our box, okay? And in the first box goes our first term, the x squared. In the last box goes our last term, 12. Then we have to make this little chart over here, and we have to say, okay, it's got to multiply to give me the x squared times the 12, which is 12x squared. And it has to add to give me that middle term, which is a negative 8x. Okay, well the factors of 12x squared are 1x and 12x, 2x and 6x, 3x and 4x. So you'll see that the 2x and the 6x add up to give me positive 8. In order to get the negative 8, I'd want to make both of them negative. So that goes into my box here and here. So I'm trying to review the box method with you as well, because I know that some of you have forgotten how to do this. So x squared minus 6x, the common factor is x. And in negative 2x and positive 12, we have to bring out this negative, and the common factor is 2. And then on the top row, our common factor is x, and in our bottom row, we're going to bring out the negative, and the common factor is 6. So there, I can factor it now, and I just did. So the two factors are x minus 6 times x minus 2. Okay, now this was a big problem on the last test because a lot of you just stopped right here and you didn't really solve it, you just factored it. But in order to solve it, what you have to do is you have to set both of these factors equal to 0 and continue to solve. So x minus 6 equals 0 and x minus 2 equals 0. Therefore, x is equal to 6 and x is equal to 2. Now, sorry, I was about to box that, but you always want to double check your answers when you're done. So I'm going to let's check the 6 first. So if I have the square root, if I plug in a 6 for x, I'd have 2 times 6 minus 3 and then plus 3, and that has to equal my x, which again was 6. So the square root of that would be 12 minus 3, which is 9, and then plus 3, and hopefully that's equal to 6. Well, the square root of 9 is 3, and then plus 3, that does in fact equal 6. Okay, now let's check the second one. So 6 is an answer. Now let's check 2. If I plug in a 2, I'm going to have the square root of 2 times 2 minus 3 plus 3, and then that also has to equal the x, which was 2. So let's see if that works. So the square root of 2 times 2 is 4. 4 minus 3 is 1. So that would be the square root of 1 plus 3. Does that equal 2? Well, the square root of 1 is 1, and then 1 plus 3 does not equal 2. So this one is not an answer. Okay, now I'm going to show you a way, tomorrow in class, I'm going to show you a way that you can check this with your calculator. So after you get your 2 answers here, I'm going to show you a way that you can check this with your calculator. Okay, let's do one last example. Again, we need to isolate our variables, so we need to move this to the other side and make that a plus 2x. So we're going to have the square root of 7x plus 2, and that equals a positive 2x. So we need to square both sides. And again, as you're working through this, if you want to pause the video and try and work through this yourself, that would be a good idea. Okay, so you have 7x plus 2 equals 4x squared. So we need to get everything on one side, so we're going to subtract the 7x and subtract the 2 over here. So we have 0 equals 4x squared minus 7x minus 2. Okay, so let's do the box. We're going to make our box to try and factor it. Put in the first term in the first box, put the last term in the last box, and then make your chart to fill in the rest of the boxes. So it needs to be 4x squared times negative 2, so it needs to multiply to give you a negative 8x squared, but add to give you that middle term, which is a negative 7x. Okay, so you'll see that it needs to be a negative 8x times 1x in order to add up to that negative 7x. So we're going to put that in our boxes, so negative 8x and positive 1x, and factor out your GCF. So in the first column, I have x. In the second column, I need to bring out that negative, and I can factor out a negative 2. In the top row, it's going to be 4x. In the bottom row, it's going to be a positive 1. Okay, so there's my factors. 4x plus 1 and x minus 2. Okay, so in order to solve it, I need to set both of them equal to 0. So 4x plus 1 equals 0, and then x minus 2 equals 0. And so when I solve on the left, I have 4x equals negative 1, divide by 4. So you get x equals negative 1/4. And then on the right side, I have x equals 2. And then, of course, you're going to plug these in to make sure that they work. So let's do that. I'm going to do it over here. So I've got the square root of 7 times a negative 1/4 plus 2 minus 2 times negative 1/4, and it should equal 0. All right, well, 7 times a negative 1/4 is a negative 7/4, and then plus 2, let's see, what would that be? It would be 0.25, and the square root of 0.25 is 0.05. And then a negative 2 times a negative 1/4 is a positive 0.05. And that does not equal 0. So this one is not an answer. So now let's try the 2. So the square root of 7 times 2 plus 2 minus 2 times your x, which is 2. And does that equal 0? Okay. Well, 7 times 2 is 14. 14 plus 2 is 16. The square root of 16 is 4. And then we have minus 4. And that does, in fact, equal 0. So this is your answer. Okay, when you come to class tomorrow, I realize this has been a long video. When you come to class tomorrow, I'm going to give you some steps that you can use to use your calculator to check for extraneous solutions. So fill out the WIS, come to class tomorrow, and these problems do take a long time to solve, so be ready to work hard tomorrow.